Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for coming all the way down to this little corner of the convention center. I'm guessing that most of you were around here and you didn't want to leave this last session of the day. Or maybe it's because you want to be here and actually listen to something that was discussed in the keynote. We're super excited about the Microsoft Word, excited about being GA with exposure management. I'm Brjann Brekkan. I'm the marketing person, and Tomer, he's our engineering lead for the product. So together, we've driven this for, what is it now, almost 2 years, 2.5 years. So we're pretty happy that this is out now, and now we can actually start to work with you all and get you using it. So let's kick off. We're going to start with a little bit of depressing news, as we always do. You want to scare you a little bit before you start kind of understanding what the scenarios are and so on. The product has been out in public preview for about 7 months, right? During that month, we've had about 70,000 odd customers and tenants and so on use it in their environments, either production or not. It's been in public preview. Out of that, we have a large set of customers that are what we call extra large, 100,000 users and above and so on. Out of that, there's a median of 200,000 assets among those customers. And then if you go down in size, it's less assets, but it's a lot of assets that you need to connect to and need to secure and understand where they are. The good part is that only 1% of the assets are actually critical assets, the ones that you really care about. So we go into a bank or we go into a museum or something, there's always these 1, 2, 3 pieces that we need to protect more than everything else. In our world, this is about prioritization. We can't fix everything. We can't do everything at once. We have to know where to prioritize. But still not good news, because 80% of the organizations in our preview, they have at least one of these open, exploitable attack paths that leads to one of those 1% critical assets. We're going to show you here today what that means and how you can use exposure management to understand your exposure, understand your attack surface, and really focus in on getting rid of those attack paths that could lead to critical assets. The problem area that we're looking at today is just a standard approach, like increased attack surfaces. This is more cloud usage. This is cloud app usage, SaaS app usage, mobile machines. Everything that goes around, we've got a larger and larger attack surface around us. With that also, what we call fragmented visibility. Fragmented visibility means each one of our areas, we might be talking endpoints, identities, cloud apps, cloud services, and so on. Each one of them have amazing, great security tools that function in that silo. CNAPP for cloud security and identity for Entra and so on. They function in that silo. But it means that that tool only gives you visibility into that silo. So you have fragmented visibility, and most organizations have somewhere in their neighborhood of 70 to 80 different security tools that you're working with, right? We've solved it somehow in the XDR and detection and response world with unifying our incident maps and understanding incident across. But now we're looking at it, okay, what happens before incident? What happens proactively? How can we get visibility across all of these tools in one single place? Lack of resources as well. If we need to integrate all these tools, that means we need more people. If we don't have a tool in place, we need more people to actually collaborate, understand, and go deep dive into each and every single area. So lack of resources becomes a problem overall in this world. Leads us to, I would call it posture fatigue, or just too many things to do. Because the cloud team has 22 different high priority attack paths, or 22 different vulnerabilities. I talked to a customer the other day, they had 6,000 CVEs, or vulnerabilities, and vulnerability assessment. They did just over and over, rotated on, and said they never felt that they got anywhere, right? That's real posture fatigue to understand which one should I be doing. But when that happens across every single team, There's no way that you can do all of it, right? So what happens is I am doing the best I can. I'm reacting to things. I'm reacting to things such as a greater visibility of an attack path in the cloud, or some highly critical vulnerability, and so on. I'm prioritizing where I believe I should be prioritizing. Okay? That's kind of the problem area. So, it's not all bad. We're moving in the right direction. We could take this slide and look at what we call attack surface management. We could look at this and say this is SaaS security posture management. Each one of those areas are all evolving away from a long list of things to do to being more risk and more prioritized based on the business. Specifically in the vulnerability management, which is hard, which is super, super hard to accomplish. We started years ago with just TI-based vulnerability management. We had a long list of vulnerabilities that we had to get through. Bunch of assets, bunch of vulnerabilities, and we just could not get through every list. So we kind of in the industry moved towards being risk-based, understanding each one of the vulnerabilities, how highly are they scored, which one should we be doing. It kind of didn't work either because it's just too much to do. So the third evolution of this is when we put in the business context of this as well. We're not just looking at the vulnerability by itself, we're looking at the vulnerability in context of critical assets, in context of what the devices could do if they were attacked or taken over, if that vulnerable attack or device would be taken over. So bringing that all together, we're reaching somewhere closer to prioritized risk management instead of just vulnerability management, okay? Prioritize risk and go that way. All right, let's talk about the product.
Thank you, Bryann. So as Bryann mentioned, we have a prioritization problem. More assets, more attack surfaces, more silos. We're in a big problem. Our assets are connected. All the technology that you buy today, devices connect over the network, communicate with the cloud, communicate with the SaaS application. The technologies that you're using are interconnected. The tools that you bought to protect them are disconnected. They're not talking to each other. They're not exchanging signals. So naturally, if you go to each one of those devices and you see the list of things that they want you to do, it will only know and give you kind of the context that they're aware of. The cloud will just spit out, here's what you need to fix in the cloud. The endpoint will tell you a list of here's what you need to fix in the endpoint. But because they're interconnected, there's a transient risk, there is the transitive risk between those. Endpoints can put clouds at risk, the cloud can put the SaaS at risk. And if those tools that have that concept are disconnected, we won't actually be able to prioritize true risk. We will live in a false sense of security. And we'll see a couple of examples of that. But in order to actually fix that problem, in order to connect the context, we introduced Microsoft Security Exposure Management. As Bryann mentioned, it was in a long public preview. Today we announced the GA of that. And the whole idea behind it is that we're connecting to your entire stack. You can see a lot of logos across a lot of different categories, and our goal is to connect to all of these security solutions and IT solutions and security systems to pull that security context. It lives in different systems, in different schemas, in different APIs, in different dashboards. We're taking all that context, we're normalizing it, we're deduplicating it, we're contextualizing it, we're putting it in a proprietary exposure graph. This is a big innovation that drives the exposure management solution, a security graph that pulls all the context from all of the solutions. And once the data is on the graph, it's fully agnostic. It doesn't care where the product came from, where the context came from. And using that exposure graph, we can do a lot of great things that we're going to demo in this session. First of all, we're going to see a set of demos around how to build appropriate attack surface management, how to get an inventory of visibility across all of different attack surfaces. And you have a handful of attack surfaces that you need to protect: the internal, the external, the end user, the cloud, the digital, and we can keep going on and on. The identity, of course. But it's not enough just to see it in a silo manner. We'll also dive into attack path analysis, how to chain all of those silo findings from all of the different tools into an attack story that tells you how you might get breached, similarly to an incident of how you got breached. If you want to become proactive and you want to be one step ahead of the attackers, we want to stitch them and look from an attacker perspective. We're going to dive into attack path analysis. And of course, we need to report. We need to quantify our risk. We have thousands of dashboards from those dozens of security tools. How do we consolidate? How do we report? How do we govern? How do we manage security? So we're going to dive into all of that. So the first set of demos that we're going to see is around attack surface management, right? You all are familiar with the saying, you can't protect what you don't see. And that's a true problem that we're seeing across a lot of our customers. And they might have the tools that provide the visibility, but again, they're disconnected. So what we're going to show you is kind of how to build an attack surface management, how to bring all of the data. Once the data is there, how to explore it, how to prioritize those assets. Let's dive into a set of demos. So this is Microsoft Security Exposure Management. For those of you who had a chance to play with it in the public preview, now it's GA. You should all have access to that in the Security Defender portal. This is the overview page. It summarizes your attack surface, give you kind of a glance of what's going on. It's going to go through a lot of evolution, right? We just went GA. We're just at the beginning of our journey. And the whole idea behind exposure management eventually is the data behind it. So it really starts with our ability to pull data from diverse data sources. Out of the box, we're connecting to all of the Microsoft Defender and security solutions. So you can imagine MDE and MDI, Defender for Endpoint, for Identity, for Cloud, external attack surface management, and so on. You don't need to do anything. We also introduced today, as part of the GA of the product, we also introduced a third-party connector ecosystems. You can actually pull in, if you have a CMDB or you have a Qualys or a Palo Alto or Rapid7 for vulnerability management or cloud security, we're going to add many, many of those connectors. We have a long list. And if it's not in the list, you can actually go and request one. So it really starts with our ability to pull the data from your security stack. Help us help you. The more data that the exposure graph collects from the different data sources, the better the prioritization becomes. Because if I understand your business, if I understand what is important to your business, if I understand what are the business units, what are the business applications, naturally the algorithm will become smarter. So it starts with kind of connecting. You can imagine a simple connector. You add your URL and your token, and a simple click of a button. You start building your unified inventories. And then you can simply go into the device inventory. If you're familiar with the device inventory, we upgraded it. So it's now we're collecting from all the different data sources. We're deduping, we're normalizing, and now you get a full view of your entire attack surfaces, device inventory, identity inventory, cloud inventory, external inventory, and so on. You can actually see the discovery source, where it came from. And naturally, the more connector that you'll add, the more data sources that you'll see over here. So in this case, we can see an asset that was detected by 2 sources, and I assume the more you scroll, you'll see more and more assets. But as Brjann mentioned, we don't want to think like attackers. We don't want to think like defenders. We want to think like attackers. And just going into a list of devices is not going to help you. We really need to pinpoint what are the assets that are important for an attacker. If an attacker will compromise an organization, which asset are going after? In order to do that, we built a new solution that is called the critical asset management. It automatically, driven by our research team, we created dozens and dozens, I believe more than 100 automatic security classifier that trying to understand the role of a certain asset based on the data that we're collecting from all the different data sources. So we can, for example, automatically detect a domain controller, an SCCM server, an Exchange server, domain admins, jump boxes, devices with confidential information. Again, the more data is collected, the classifier is satisfied and can actually go and say, oh, this device is important. So we are building those connectors. You'll continue seeing the research team adding more and more of these classifiers. You can simply go to each one of them. In this case, let's choose one, enterprise admin. We can see that the default that the research team have decided is the criticality level is high, but of course you can control it based on your needs. You can see, of course, the assets that were detected, and it's a continuous rule. If you're familiar with the detection rule, it runs in the background all the time and tries to evaluate all the assets. So the more data connector that you add, goes into the graph. This rule will run on the security graph all the time, and the exposure graph all the time, and it will try to find all of those critical assets. And once an asset is discovered, everything changes, because now we have a context, a business context. Business context feeds our experiences. This business context feeds our security prioritization, because now I understand, oh, this is an important context. I need to give it some more weight in my prioritization algorithm. Now, naturally, we can go and define many of those predefined classifications, but you know your business best. So we also provide you the ability to write your own classification. We're seeing a lot of our customers adding these specialized classifications that are tailored to their needs and to their business needs. So I can go ahead and write down a new rule and decide that I'm looking for devices that has a certain naming convention, and maybe they'll start with, I don't know, AB underscore. And then I can go, click next, see a preview of all the assets that were evaluated against that, decide once they will be matched which criticality I want to assign, click on next, and that's it. Rule is created, runs continuously on the graph, always trying to find those assets, right? So every time a new asset was detected, a new employee was onboarded, was added to CMDB, we connected to CMDB, we're pulling the information, we're feeding it to the graph, the rule is running, detecting this device, it's being tagged, it's influencing the algorithm, it's all dynamic.
Can I just add one? One of the core things there is that if you connect it to like MDC in the cloud, and you've already created your own tags, or you've already done tagging of your machines, you can see those tags in here and just reuse them and apply those tags onto your classification rules.
Yep. And most importantly, you can go and see all of those devices and their criticality level in the device inventory. We created a new component. We're going to see it in the next set of demos when we'll go into attack path analysis. It's called the attack surface map. As I mentioned, under the hood, we have a graph database. We wanted to provide you the lens as kind of this internal database. We wanted to externalize because we understood there's a lot of different use cases customer can use that. And when we released the first version of the map, we saw a lot of different customers using it for different use cases. The identity and access management team used this to evaluate privileges and permissions as part of their kind of entitlement management. The vulnerability management team started to look at, hey, is that vulnerability actually reachable from an attacker perspective? The SOC team started to evaluate during an incident response. We're seeing many, many different use cases. The red team is evaluating and doing kind of threat modeling on top of that. What if an attacker will reach this point? Where can they go? We're seeing the incident response team during an incident building blast radius from compromised assets. Where can an attacker go from here? So many different use cases that we're discovering, and we'll get to that later. Now, as we mentioned earlier, there's a big challenge in the industry, right? Security tools don't communicate with each other, which means that you're actually falling into what we call the silo effect. We're all familiar with the saying, defender thinks in list, attacker thinks in graph, and this is the true meaning of that. If we won't have an attacker perspective, if we won't be able to predict how an attacker will chain all of these silos findings from all of these different tools that coming in different schemas from different vendors, we will always lose. And if we really want to prevent the next incident to become proactive, we need to shift the asymmetry and provide the defenders an attacker perspective. Think about it. When an attacker breaches an organization, he has the fog of war. He has no idea where he needs to go, right? They don't have a blueprint of the entire organization. You do. The exposure graph provides you a blueprint of your organization with all the context, which means that you're one step ahead of attackers, and you have the opportunity to proactively predict where an attacker will go and fix it before they will go. And this is exactly where attack path analysis comes into play, right? If you're familiar with the concept, the whole idea is to chain a set of silos findings into an attacker story, similar to an incident. An incident tells you how I got breached. An attack path analysis tells you how you might get breached. Use that. Imagine that every attack path that you're seeing that is critical, treat it as an incident. Fix it. Why wait? Let's jump into a couple of demos, see how it works. So naturally, we're in the map component that you saw earlier. And you can go and play around with it. There's a lot of kind of flexibility. All the context is in the map. There's a set of layers. You can see exactly the data source. You can see the vulnerabilities. You can, of course, go and play around and expand kind of the reachability from each asset. And it's going to go further and further. And you can go play around with it. You can see exactly the type of edges. What can an attacker do if it reaches a certain node? But naturally, you won't be able to go and explore all the different paths an attacker can do doing that manually. So we did it for you. And we built an automated algorithm that traverses on the graph. Imagine like a chess game. In a chess game, there's a set of legal moves that you can do, that you can move. The same legal move we codified inside the exposure graph. There's an algorithm that understands what is legit from an attacker perspective, which means that if I manage to reach this box, what can I do? Can I log into this device? Can I exploit this vulnerability? Can I leverage this misconfiguration? So we build those steps inside the exposure graph. And the algorithm runs continuously on the graph on all the context that is being collected by all the data connectors. Again, more data connectors, more context, more steps being satisfied, better attack path calculation. And we provide you kind of an overview of, here's an attacker point of view. Here's how an attacker might chain a different chain of silo finding into a story. So you can actually go to the attack path analysis. In this case, you can actually go and say, what is the entry point? How an attacker what is the breach point? An attacker will go inside the organization. What is the target? Where is it heading? These are all the critical assets that we defined earlier. And what is the criticality of those assets? You can actually go and filter and build your own attack path that you're mostly concerned about. Here's a couple of interesting ones that we just announced. The first one is around hybrid. Given that we're pulling data from on-prem, from cloud, from the identity fabric, we can actually chain that story into a story of how an attacker might take advantage of a device on-prem with a high severity vulnerability and leverage the fact that it has permission to lateral move into an Azure Key Vault from on-prem to cloud. And if you add a SaaS solution from on-prem to cloud to SaaS, and if you add an identity or data security solution, all the data is going to be consolidated. If the steps will satisfy the algorithm, you'll see the steps. You will see the attack path. And we discovered some crazy attack path, things that red teams will never discover on their own, because imagine like a chess game thinking 7, 8, 10 steps away, step ahead. The same thing, this is what the algorithm is doing. So you can actually go and see all these attack paths in action within the attack map and get an attacker perspective. Here's the story of the attacker. In this case, we can actually see they will start with this specific asset. This asset was discovered by MDE and MDI in this case, and it has a set of vulnerability. You can click on it and see exactly the type of vulnerabilities that are accessible for an attacker to exploit. And if they will manage to exploit that, they will use the fact that it contains a certain identity that can authenticate to the cloud and has permission to a certain key vault, which means that if, in a nutshell, if an attacker will compromise this asset in this vulnerability, which is exploitable, this data is coming from the vulnerability assessment solution, the one that you connected. Could be Microsoft, could be not. The data that you're seeing over the edges is coming from the identity fabric, again, based on the identity fabric that you're connected, and so on to the cloud. And we're providing you a full view of an attacker. This is a high likelihood attack path, just an incident waiting for it to happen. Don't wait. Proactively go and fix that. But if you don't want to go and proactively fix that, there's some more options, right? Because now it gets interesting, because it's not just involving one team. You need to involve 3 teams. You need to involve the endpoint team. You need to involve the identity team. You need to involve the cloud team. Suddenly it brings the team together. And we're seeing a lot of interesting kind of use cases of customers that started the silo team that's starting to kind of collaborate together and actually nominate a champion that looks at risk across. We actually call it risk ops. Like a SecOp that looks at incident, we have a risk op that looks horizontally. So it's interesting use case that we're starting to see as some of our customers estate. The last one I wanted to show you in this specific demo is the choke point analysis. Now, as you can imagine, going to be a lot of attack paths. So attack path starts with an asset that has a high likelihood to get breached, and it ends in a critical assets that you defined in our previous step, right? The more critical assets that you have, the more breach point that you have, there's going to be a lot of combination where attacker can go and traverse the organization. But they're all going to kind of eventually meet at a certain point, and that point is called a choke point. Eventually, it's an asset that many attack paths go through, which means that if you eliminate that asset, you will be able to eliminate dozens and hundreds of attack paths at once. In this specific,
you might not eliminate the asset, but you might eliminate the choke point.
The choke point.
Yes.
Good point. In this case, we can see, for example, there's a certain asset that has a reachability to 156 critical targets and is attached to more than 400 attack paths, which means that this is a choke point. From this asset, if someone will compromise this asset, an attacker will have reachability to almost 156 critical assets. Naturally, if I'll go and fix all the vulnerabilities within that choke points, or it will dramatically reduce the exposure of the organization, and we'll be able to reduce the amount of attack path.
What I've also seen a couple of customers talk to me about when they see this is it also shows them a view of perhaps, I'll call it bad architecture of applications, where they're all using a common managed identity or a common system somewhere in there. It's not just that it's a choke point on a bunch of attack paths, but it also targets like, wait, why do we have something which has 300 different apps connecting to it? It helps you identify those things as well, which are basically IT stuff, not really security. But treat them as choke points for security reasons to begin with.
Yep, so now you actually have different ways to prioritize risk. You can prioritize from a defender perspective, look at list of recommendation, right? Based on the algorithms, the risk-based prioritization, all the context that is being collected, the vulnerability, the likelihood. Or you can also look at attack path, chaining those together. And if I forgot to mention, when we build those attack paths, we also take compensating control into account. Meaning that if there's a firewall or there's a certain condition that doesn't allow that step, that attack path will not be created, right? If, for example, I know that there's credential memory that the attacker can harvest using Mimikatz, but ELSA's protection is enabled, I know that it will be protected, you won't be able to see that attack path because there is a compensating control on that specific device. The more data connectors we have, the more security tools we're connecting to, we're assessing the security control, and we're taking them into account when we're building those attack paths. It's an important factor. So this is another kind of tool in your prioritization arsenal that also allows you to validate the risk from an attacker perspective. This is how really an attacker will go about and exploit all these vulnerabilities, and it actually gives you an evidence. When you go back to the security team, the IT team, and tell them, I want you to fix this. But it's not just one problem, it's 3 problems, high likelihood. Here's a set of evidence. We're starting to see kind of how attack path is becoming a great tool to get a buy-in from the IT team and from the security teams and from the different teams to work together and actually mobilize the fix and the solutions and reduce the exposure in the organization. Now, naturally, we're connecting to all of these security tools. And one of the kind of the biggest use cases we're seeing from many of our customers is reporting. I want to govern a certain security program. I want to make sure that, my leadership understand how am I doing. I want to govern and see that different security programs and initiatives that I want to drive in the organization are actually working, reducing risk, that I'm getting ROIs from the tools that I already bought. And we're seeing that need coming from different decision makers and CISOs and C1 level managers that bought all of these tools and they want to see that their team actually utilizing them. So we brought all the data into the exposure graph. We consolidated, we deduplicated it, and this is one of the important bits over here, right? Because if 2 tools detected the same assets in a different name, some tools might not deduplicate them and then double count them. You don't want that. You want to make sure that you're deduping the assets and counting the vulnerability as it should. In order to do that, in order to provide that visibility, to quantify the risk, to provide the ROI, to show kind of the leadership, and to govern the different program, we created a new concept that we call security initiatives. We asked a list of, we talked to a lot of CISOs and security managers, and we asked them the million-dollar questions. What are your FY25 priorities? What are the different initiatives you want to drive in your organization? We got a long list of kind of initiatives that customers really want to drive. Some of them want to improve AI. Some of them want to go to multi-cloud. Some of them want to start assessing their external attack surface. Each one of them has a different initiative that they want to drive. And this brought us to kind of to the realization that we need to provide a set of tools to manage those programs, to manage those initiatives. So we introduced the concept of security initiative. Customers really fell in love with it. You can think of it as the evolution of Microsoft Secure Score. If Microsoft Secure Score was a list of, you went to Microsoft Secure Score, you saw the score, and you saw a list of security recommendations. Go do A, B, and C. The problem with Microsoft Secure Score was we provided a list of what you need to do, but we didn't really explain why you need to do it. We didn't connect the what to the why. And this is kind of a version 2 of how we're changing that perspective using security initiative. And the whole idea behind it, the whole idea behind security initiative, we designed them like an OKR, an objective key result, where the objective in this case, for example, let's say my Uber goal in FY25 is to improve my endpoint security program. So your objective is endpoint security protection improvement. In order to prove that you're doing well, you want to see a set of key results. These are the the security metrics that we added over here. We curated those security metrics with experts in each one of those domains. And these are the ones that leadership wants to see. They want to see them improve. But we took the next step. We mapped all those security metrics into the actual security recommendations, security controls that you need to do. So actually, we flipped Secure Score upside down. Instead of starting with the security recommendation, the what, we started with the why. I want to improve my endpoint security. And then we dive into what do I need to do and how I'm doing that. So we actually flipped that around. It resonates with a lot of our customers. They're starting to use that tool to break down and scope down the different initiative they want to drive in the organization. And now they can actually go and say, I want to create a sub-scope. I don't want to boil the ocean. I don't need to fix every endpoint. I just want to focus on this business unit or this specific area or this device group or this set of user groups. So you can actually go and create that sub-scope. And within that sub-scope, assign an owner, set a target for the score, and then you have an owner accountable to increase the score. They can go use this tool to report to leadership. Naturally, we're saving the data over time, so you can actually see the progression over time. More importantly, we're also snapshotting the history, so you can actually see why there is a certain drop. Something happened over here. You can actually go and see, oh, there's a certain metric that drops yesterday. We can go into that. We can see that the critical devices with high risk were dropped, and you can actually see the actual assets that drop, because we get everything down to the asset level. We get the assets, we build the context, we build the security recommendation, we map it to the different security program using initiative, and it's a great tool for us to connect between the threats, the programs, to the assets, to the actual exposure, and the posture of the security tools. And there's a variety of security initiative that we drove.
Can I just, can you go back to that one again?
Yep.
Because he's doing every demo here live, just so you know. I'm marketing like, don't do it. Like, no, we're gonna do live. At the top of this, you see what's called review updates. Talk to me about what, and this was not planned, by the way, I just realized, what's review updates at the top?
So one of the feedback that we got from customers, specifically from Secure Score, is don't add new controls because it's going to fluctuate the score. And then we need to explain what happened. So what we ended up doing is we ended up creating a process that every month we need to tell the customer in advance, hey, here are the controls that are coming, expect a big change. No, We want everything to be dynamic. We're in the world of a continuous threat exposure management. We want it to be continuous in real time. So we actually introduced right now, you can read it more in the GA blog, our ability to do a change management. So if a new change to a metric, to a recommendation that will drop the score, you will see that change. You will need to accept it, and then you're actually accountable for that change. So you actually know what dropped the certain score. It's a great tool kind of to manage the versions, manage the versions of the security initiatives. And we're going to introduce new capability into the initiative, ability to subscope it and create kind of many different layers. So you can actually go and build multiple endpoint security, assign it to different users in different business units and so on. It's going to be a tool that allows you to manage the security program in each one of those initiatives.
Just so you know, for all of you using Secure Score, that means that when your manager asks why the score dropped, you can't blame us. Okay? That, oh, Microsoft added another control. Like, it's in there. You know that it's going to change. You know what the score is. So.
And we had a lot of, so it's not just about security domains, right? There's mainly 5 attack surfaces that you should be concerned about. Your internal infrastructure, external, what's accessible from the outside, your cloud, your end user, and your digital. Digital meaning dark web, social media, someone essentially talking about your organization, you want to know about that. If you have visibility into all of these 5 attack surfaces, and you have tools that give you the visibility, the recommendation, and so on, you're in a very good shape. Not all customers are in the same maturity. Some of them are starting to explore 2 or 3 attack surfaces, but the goal is naturally to expand to all of them. And we're providing the initiative across all of them, right? You connect the tool, either it's Microsoft, a third party, we have the data connector, we build a dedicated security initiative with curated metrics specifically for that. And there's a lot of other, of course, handful security initiative. For example, ransomware. Ransomware initiative is a big one, right? Customers are concerned about ransomware. Customers are concerned about improving their zero trust journey. This is a great example of how our team can work together. See how many different products are used within this specific initiative. We can actually see that we have Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Identity, Entra, Defender for Office, Defender for Cloud. Before that, every team managed ransomware protection in their own domain. Now you can actually see horizontally. If you want to run a program, reduce the likelihood of a ransomware attack, it needs to run across everything. And if you want to cross everything, you need all the data in one place, deduplicate, normalize, and you can do that on the exposure graph. And we have a lot of those security initiatives. You should go and explore that in the threat initiative. There are threat actors and security tools. You want to know the million-dollar question. You heard something in dark reading. Hey, there's this new APT going on. You can come here and see exactly whether your security stack is configured in a manner that will protect you from that specific threat. It's important. It's a question that's thrown around a lot. We're pulling all the data, and it's easy for us to answer that once the data is in a single place. So this is the security initiative. We're going to invest heavily in that, in the security metrics, and we're looking forward to add more and more capability in the future, also building your own initiative, building those subscope. If you're interested in getting a new initiative, you can also click on Suggest New Initiative. We want to know. We're adding and we'll prioritize based on what we're hearing from customers.
OK, thank you. So if you haven't got it yet, so don't just manage vulnerabilities. Please start focusing on understanding and continuously managing exposure. Understanding the exposure and understanding the attack surface is one of the most key aspects of this session and what the change mechanism that you need to put in place inside of your organization, right? This isn't just a tool. You've got to start to think about how do I put proactive security into a programmatic approach. So call out here to Gartner, who has been using a terminology called CTEM, or Continuous Threat Exposure Management, for a few years now, where it's all about a programmatic approach. This slide is not a product. Right? You can go see Tim. There's a bunch of blogs and a bunch of information from Gartner that talks about how an organization should think about implementing a change and a continuous threat exposure management program within their organization, ranging from the scoping that you showed to the discovery, prioritization, and validation, and mobilization. Each step needs not just a tool, but also the people and process parts of it as well. So big thank you for them to driving the industry towards this and so on. And it helps us as a vendor, but it also helps every other vendor in the market that looks at this new, exciting area of proactive security. And there's plenty of them out there, right? So how to build all this with Microsoft. We talked about exposure management as the product at the top level. Exposure management as a product is a solution that unifies all of the Microsoft security tools plus the third-party tools that we mentioned as well. It's not a tool that replaces or takes away the need for Microsoft vulnerability or Defender vulnerability management or Defender cloud security posture management. You still need those tools. You need that deep insight, that deep security domain knowledge and siloed area of expertise. But this is about crossing those barriers, unifying the data, enabling you to do what we just showed you in here, right? So the way that we do it and the circles around this represents what is integrated in exposure management today. The other circles that are in there, Purview and Intune, are coming. They're kind of starting to get in there, a little bit in the cloud and Purview, a little bit of Intune is in there, but we want to continue to evolve this thing, right? This means the one FAQ question that everyone is going to ask afterwards, how do I buy it? It is included or it's available with the licenses on the right-hand side. So if you own E5, you own most of those boxes on that side. You own the data is yours. All we do is bring it all together to allow you to reason over your data, right? So thank you.
Yes, yes.
There's one downside to it, though. You are going to be charged a little bit for the third-party data that we bring in. We don't own that data. That we need to charge you a little bit of cost for to bring that third-party signal in to attach those new data points from those services as well. But for us, this one is there for you to unify your data, your experiences on it. So,
and you need to start incrementally. Don't boil the ocean. Naturally add more and more attack surfaces and more based on the security tools that you have. CTEM is a process, right? It's a journey. It's not perfect. You start somewhere. You don't have an external attack surface, go get one. You don't go and scope, you boil the ocean around your devices or your internal or cloud. Scope it down, focus, get the ROI from your tools.
Let me use that. In the tool, if you don't have all tools, so you don't have cloud security, right? And you go into a security initiative that needs that. You're going to see the metrics, you're going to see the data, but you're going to see that the data is missing, right? So you're going to have to understand, like, yes, the data is there. For me to get that full visibility, you need to hook in the tools.
Yeah, and customers that built an exposure management program, right? Exposure management, evolution of vulnerability, looking at exposure in general. It's a better prioritization. It's a better way to look at risk with the growing attack surfaces. Actually, we're seeing many of our customers getting a lot of benefit from it. First of all, as I mentioned earlier, the fact that now we're bringing context and connecting different security tools, we're actually, a new kind of persona was born. We call it the risk ops. We need to kind of come up with a better industry name. Maybe it will stick. But similar to a SecOps that it doesn't care where the alerts come from, right? It doesn't care if the attacker compromised the endpoint, the identity, the email, the cloud. They want to incident respond to that specific incident. The same thing needs to happen to risk, but risk is siloed. So we're actually starting kind of to see the beginning of a persona, an Uber persona that look horizontally. And he cares about reducing the threat against, the exposure against a specific threat across endpoint and identity and cloud. We call it the risk ops. We expect to see more of that. The second thing that we're seeing is because we're connecting the dots between endpoint and cloud and SaaS and so on, we're starting to see more and more kind of collaboration between teams that usually were siloed, right? The endpoint team just focus on endpoint reduction. The cloud team reduces focus on cloud reduction. But when we're connecting the dots, suddenly you're seeing the value. And most importantly, 1 + 1 = 3. When I take data from the endpoint and provide it to the cloud, and from cloud to the endpoint, I help each other, and by that, supercharging the different products. So to finalize the discussion for today, here's some call for action for you. Exposure management is out. It's GA. You can open up security.microsoft.com and play with that. First of all, as I mentioned earlier, treat attack paths as incident just waiting to happen. Don't wait for the next breach. Go fix the ones that are critical, investigate, mobilize your team to go and address them. The second thing you want to do is go check out the security initiatives, right? The evolution of SecureScope, we're broken down into different scopes. Go understand the ones that you're tracking today, see your score, build a program to improve it, and also pick up a set of new initiatives, things that you want to improve in the next fiscal year. Define a champion and help them drive that in the organization. The third thing that I recommend you to do is, of course, go and understand the threats that matters to you. Look at the threat initiatives and go figure out which one you want to tackle, the threat actor that you're concerned about, the security tool that you're concerned about. We provide that visibility and lenses in the security initiative. And most importantly, exposure management is a new domain. You need to educate the different teams to get benefit from it. The vulnerability management team will be better. The identity access management better. The security operation team will be better. Context is king. This is what we're doing with Exposure Graph, bringing the context, deduping, providing you the tools to reduce your exposure. Thank you very much.